Move that out of the way. It's a little bit distracting. We're live. 7:18. Tonight we're going to talk about a couple of things. One, and they're interrelated. One is doing your own porting on stuff. And the other one is because the thumbnail that I put up is a Ford, guys might recognize it as a big block Ford head. And the reason I have that up is because the next two videos that I'm doing, which the first one should appear tomorrow, it definitely will appear tomorrow. And the second one right after that, it's a series. And what it will be is testing on big block Fords. So different power levels, how to achieve these different power levels. Be good stuff for big block Ford, guys. And in that test, we use ported heads. Now, we didn't use any DIY ported heads, although as you've seen from this channel, I have done some of that before, and it works out fairly well. I don't think I've ever completely ported a full set of heads and run them, but I have done one intake, one exhaust, one chamber. You know, I've waded in, I've meandered in on the porting. But what I wanted to say is there are a couple of ways, even for the guy that doesn't know and hasn't had any, let's say instruction other than maybe what you've seen on the internet. And there's lots of good stuff. Eric Weingartner, there's David Vizard. If you haven't gone to their stuff and you're interested in porting, definitely go see them. Go watch their videos. They have lots of good stuff. A lot of it is advanced. So, you got to start, you got to walk, and then you can run. But how does the guy just like, the hardest part usually is the first step. So how do you get started on something like that? And what I would say is just like the easiest way to do stuff, take chances, do some scientific stuff that you're not quite sure of. And that is to do it on a motor that you don't care that much about. So that's why wrecking yard motors are really good. So you've seen in the past where I've recommended, so guys would ask, well, how do I get started? How do I learn about motors? Well, if you want to learn how to build one, the first thing you should do is actually take one apart. So you should get a wrecking yard motor, an LS, a small block Chevy, Ford, Chevy, Dodge, I don't care what it is. And then you should film yourself taking out apart. And then, because you have all of this stuff, all of this footage, photos and video, you should be able to put it back together. And after you do that once or twice, you'll be able to do that without your video. Pretty easy. Same thing with porting. So you can go online and look and see what people are doing. And you don't have to have, it doesn't have to look like a fancy brand new CNC deal. It doesn't have to have brand new valves and all that stuff. You're not looking for that. What you're looking for when you first start, when you're porting, is for ways not to ruin the head. Don't make it worse. Here are some examples. One is if you have your porting tool and you're doing it in the bowl, you're kind of hogging it out. That's a good place. First of all, in the bowl area is where you're going to get some good flow gains. Out at the entry of the intake port or the exit of the exhaust port, that's the last place you want to look. You want to look in the bowl, and you want to look in the chamber, because that's where you're going to get flow gains. You could get a lot of times you can get airflow gains by unshrouding the valve. So laying the chamber back, you're going to make the chamber bigger. So the compression is going to go down a little bit because of the change in chamber size. You can mill it and get it back. A lot of times there's a trade-off with that kind of stuff. But when you're doing bowl work, you don't have that same kind of thing. You're not changing the static compression. So if you go in and do bowl work, what you want to do is go in, just knock down big edges, reach in there and feel and go, oh yeah, that's a big edge. That doesn't need to be there. And so do stuff that are very obvious big changes, big sharp edges where they've, plunged the cutter in, any sort of, casting irregularity, all that stuff. Don't change the short radius initially. I wouldn't. That's an art. So I wouldn't do that. But bowl work you can do. You can make everything shiny. Like you could go in with a Dremel and a sandpaper roll and a cartridge roll, and then go in and you can make everything smooth. That'll look really good. It'll make you feel better. It's probably not going to do a whole lot in terms of power, but it's not going to hurt anything. If you just made everything smooth, that'd be fine. And that's the other thing that I would start out with is when you're porting, even when you're doing bowl work, I wouldn't start out with a carbide cutter. I wouldn't use, and this is especially true on aluminum, I wouldn't use an aluminum cutter because you could take big chunks out with that. You could do big skirt marks. And you don't want to do that. When you're going into porting, you want to get a feel for how the porting tool works and then a feel for how much it takes off. The more aggressive the cutter is, and again, this is more so on aluminum than steel, because steel is pretty tough. So it takes a little bit of work and a lot of time and effort to deal with iron heads. So you can start with those because you're less likely to do something where you cut a big trough in one and go, oh yeah, that's probably not good. At the very least, it looks terrible. So you don't have to worry about that. But when you're doing the bowl work, one of the things to think about, Joshua, what's up? Thank you very much. Is try not to draw the cutter or the cartridge roll across the valve seat, because you don't want to upset the valve jaw. Because if you put a trough across that, now the valve jaw is not going to seal, and that's an easy way to otherwise ruin a good set of heads. You got to have it recut after you do that, especially if you put a good trench in it. That's not good. If you just touch it, it's a junkyard set of heads. Maybe just do the Super Ritchie razor blade rebuild and put some lapping compound in there. See if it still laps in. If it laps in, I just say run it. But that's one danger area that you don't want to go into. You don't want to touch where the valve facing meets the valve seat facing, and that does all the sealing, and so you don't want to disrupt that. But down in the bowl area that's where you're going to get flow gains. So don't be worried about trying it yourself. Even if you went to the wrecking yard and didn't buy a motor, you could go to the wrecking yard and buy a head. Guys probably have heads that they want to throw away. Somebody has a used set of heads a set of 305 Chevy heads or something, or the 706 heads or something that they've damaged and it's got a bad, one bad hole or whatever. Then you could take a used head and just do practicing on that and go, oh yeah, that you just feel, how does it feel? You don't even need a flow bench. Just go, oh yeah, I think that feels better. Does that work? Yeah, that seems to be working okay. Doesn't look like I've damaged anything. I haven't ruined anything, but just don't be afraid to try it. You should try it. And like I said, it will make you feel better even if you're putting together like a stock motor and you go, oh yeah, I did a little porting on it. Maybe you did nothing. Maybe in the tiny little camshaft that you're running, and maybe in the RPM range that you're running, maybe it did nothing, but it's another thing you get to add to your list of things that I did, of the modifications. I got a 4-barrel, I got a distributor, I got headers, I got a mildly ported head, I got, and so you could, that way when you're going to be telling people, well, I made 500 horsepower. Well, maybe not that much. But the more things that you have on your list, the better you can sell that story, and that's what happens. But don't be worried about trying it. I've done some porting, and I'm not a porter, just like I'm not a tuner, but I've done both of them, and I kind of have an idea. I don't know that I would want to do actual porting. It's a lot of work. But I did do some, and it actually worked out fairly well on the 3800 Series 2 heads. I did a little bit on that one. I have done some on some LS stuff. I've done some 706 bowls and some chambers, and luckily, because Westech has an airflow bench, I'm able to document those and kind of test before and after to see if what I'm doing is going the right way. And in those cases, I would do a little bit and then do more. But the reason that we're talking about all this is because I have this. Here's my photog. So this is the thumbnail photo, and this is a big block Ford head. It's even a fancy painted one. Look, it's even been taped off, like the paint would hurt this big block Ford head. But look, we even put tape down in the spark plug holes and stuff. It's pretty fancy. But like I said, don't be afraid to try it. And this one was a mildly ported set, and it looks fancy because they took the time and effort to fluff it up out at the exit port that's an exit of the exhaust and the entry port. So when somebody looks at it, goes, oh yeah, those are ported and polished. You tell people that it is, and it works out pretty well. And like I said, if you have some time and don't want to buy another set of heads and want to improve the stuff that you have, and usually on all the stock heads that you'll find, there's going to be room for improvement. Now, I haven't seen too many stock heads. LS3 heads are pretty good. I don't know that I would do a bunch of porting on those, but certainly a 706 head on an LS, any small block head you could make better, any factory big block head, all of them you could just do a little bit. Like I said, even if you just did it for cosmetic purposes and made it look better, you're gonna feel better, about your combination. Excuse me. So let's see. Joshua, did I miss your question, or did you have a question? I'm gonna try to scroll back and see what's what. Brisbane, Australia is in the house. Welcome. Jeffrey, yeah, you are. You're live. You're live. You're all the way live. 3800. Set my 243 to Texas speed. They have programs. Lots of guys have good CNC programs for all of the factory heads. Jeffrey, I need to work on the guns. They haven't seen weights, and it's pre-COVID probably. I clean up the ports, gasket match, and trim the valve guides a bit. Yeah, like I said, the gasket match, that's cosmetic, but the other stuff can certainly help. I actually started porting my personal Honda B18 head. Nice. That's not one that I would suggest people learn on, because that's maybe a B18A or B head, not a B18C head. Those are really good the way that they came from the factory. And I've seen a lot of guys just ruin them. Just 3D print the heads for you. That would be good. Started porting in 1975. Bernie Weidler had a small block Ford 100 serial number 3. Not as easy as it seems. I don't really understand all of that statement there. I don't know what's going on there. I started on Chevy TBI heads. The porting definitely helped. Yeah, I mean, an 882 head, all of those are, not fabulous. Centra's in the house. Oh, you answered on Instagram? Okay. Well, happy to help them. R205 Iron Dart heads any good? I don't know what 205 head you're talking about. I don't know what engine family you're talking about. And are they good compared to what? Chances are they are at least going to be better than a stock one, but I don't know which engine family or anything it is. I've seen damage done with die grinders on cylinder heads. Like I said, we went over that. It'd be really hard to do on a steel head, or that's why we'd start out with a cartridge roll, so it takes off less material. Before I retired from porting business, I would offer a customer to port one intake and one exhaust in the chamber and make the no-go gauges so they could copy my mods. That would be good. That's a good idea. I've seen guys have the templates for those. Did you ever get to flow Vizard's head? I think I did. L3 heads are 68 cc's versus the other 6.2 and LY6 head. Are you saying that the other rec port heads are somehow a different chamber size? Any advice on porting Mopar 440 trick flow heads? I have a set, but I've never run them, so I don't know anything about. And like I said, I'm not a head porter, so I wouldn't be the guy, especially about a specific set of heads. Can you show the parts of the cylinder head, short side radius, etc.? I can't on the live feed because I don't have cylinder heads here. I have a 429 with an RV cam. Do you suggest roller rockers? Yeah. You're not going to see a lot probably from that mild application. But the thing that I do like about roller rockers, obviously you reduce friction. You might see less deflection, although you're not going to have a lot of spring RV cam. You're not going to be running a lot of RPM, but they won't back off like a lot of factory rockers will because of the pinch nuts. I don't know what year that is, but the pinch nuts tend to back off. Non-VTEC BTB 18B. Yeah, I wouldn't feel nearly as bad about attacking one of those. I don't have the flow numbers handy on Visor's head. I remember it being like the numbers that he was saying are not the numbers that I got when I flowed it. He has a homemade flow bench, and I was using a Superflow 600. So they're definitely going to be different. You cannot hear anything. You should be able. Does everybody hear me? You might try logging off and logging back on. Shadow Ops, I don't understand why you think that there would be a difference between an LS3 head and an LY6 or any of the other Recport heads. I thought that all of the chamber sizes were the same. I have a set of 86 Corvette 128 aluminum heads, new guides. Flow numbers are garbage, but the added lightness, they do. Those heads weren't, they're light, so they're better than Iron Head. They have small chambers, so on smog heads, they bring the compression up, which is good. And you can port them. And I've seen guys do pretty good work on porting those once they're done. Head recommendation for a 302 in a truck. If it's a Ford 302, more interested in low speed torque. The stock one is not bad. A ported stock one's not bad, but like a 165 airflow head probably is good. I was working with John from CHI. Our goal was to produce a head that did not need porting. That's good. The CHI heads are good. A plus on sound good. I'm glad everybody can hear. Reloading. Okay, so you close YouTube out and start it again. Yeah, sometimes I don't know what the deal is. On all cylinders, LS guide states that LS3 heads a 68 cc chamber and the trucks are 70. I don't know. I'd have to ask Brian why he has that number in there. And I go by measurements. I don't go by what that thing says. Reloading. Are you asking if I saw the recent camshaft test? Or are you asking if I did the recent camshaft test for Engine Masters? Think of maybe making a long runner Barrett intake. Isn't the factory Barrett intake like an NA one already a long runner one? Handy hints. You want to upgrade your 462 valve. I have videos up on what we did when we upgraded it. Your O2 is definitely going to be PI motor. And the way to have it make more power is to do the things that you do on any other motor. So you're right, heads, cam, intake, throttle body, headers, boost, nitrous, all that works good. What's the cheapest way to get 500 horsepower with a 5.7 Hemi? Mom, what are you making for dinner? A cam and springs and ported heads might get you there, or boost might get you there too. Boost definitely would. How would you protect the valve seats? I mean, you could theoretically remove them. What you do is just be careful, because you shouldn't be porting where you would come in contact with the valve seat at that angle. You should never be going in at that angle. I kind of go perpendicular to the base of the bowl. I ported the ejection port in 1911 today. That definitely counts as porting, right? Did it make it better? Did you see the recent Engine Masters camshaft test episode? I don't know. I didn't. I don't have, or if I do, I haven't watched it, and I don't know which one that is, because if it just came out, it means that they tested it, shot it long time ago, or maybe you're just seeing it. Maybe it's years old. I don't know. I don't know anything about the cams that they tested, so I don't know. I accidentally hit send instead of backspace. So we do need a poll, right? Have you ever ported your own heads or customers? It could be. It doesn't have to be yours. How much horsepower do you think I can get with a stage 3 cam and 862 heads with a 3600 converter, Trailblazer SS intake manifold at a 92 millimeter throttle by? I don't know what stage 3 cam you're talking about. There's like a million of them. I don't know what motor you're talking about. I don't know any of those things. The dual runner intake manifold. The butterflies bend and come loose when using boost on an NA manifold. The butterflies bend and come loose? Victor Junior heads worth porting. Yeah, I've seen programs for Victor Junior heads. Again, I don't know which heads you're talking about. Is it a 5-liter Ford? Is it a did it probably make Victor small block Chevy heads and stuff? But I've seen programs for 5-liter Ford. I'm assuming a 5-liter Ford because you have F-150 in your name. I'm trying to be the 400 or 500 horsepower. Let's see, Marcus Hosier's. Oh, again, I don't know what engine you're talking about. My understanding is pocket porting to make like a bony elbow. That's a new description to me. Do you think porting the Holley split intake for the LS could gain power? I don't know. Only if the intake itself is some kind of flow restriction. I doubt that cast manifold is a 100% optimized for every combination. So there will be combinations that you can improve the power with porting. I just don't know where that would happen, like at what level, at what power level, or what combination that's going to happen. The split port manifold would not be something that I would be looking at the heads and not the intake manifold on that. What gains have you seen from just polishing versus porting and polishing? I don't know. I've never done that test. Just polishing, making the thing look shiny, will probably do absolutely nothing. You had to have taken some material off and improved the flow, and just making the surface finish shiny doesn't necessarily change the flow. Julie, so you want a long runner intake manifold? Okay, I get that. Marcus, is it a 4.8 or is it a 5.3? Because it's going to be a difference if you have that camshaft on a 4.8. If this is an NA motor, you need to look at the 500 horsepower videos that I've done, and you can see how to make 500 horsepower, at least from a 5.3. You're not going to do that on a 4.8, or if you can do that on a 4.8, it's going to take a lot of work because you don't have enough room to put enough camshaft in there. And if you are able to do it, you're going to do it at a really, really high RPM, and it's not going to be fun to drive. Jesse, your question about the headers, they use a different set of headers. They use 1 3/4 headers on their application, I think. Not just the primary size difference, but it's a different design. And I think that they also use a full, I think that they also run a full exhaust with mufflers on it. I poured 3 sets of E7 heads and 1 set of GT40s. One head I went deep into the intake port into the water jacket at the intake valve. Yeah, if you keep going, you're going to find water. I mean, Dulcich, we remember talking to him. He's like, I think it's my 3rd or 4th slant 6 head that I've been porting, and I've hit water on a couple of them. Just tuning in, but what about header gaskets? What do you want to know about header gaskets? I recommend them. Header gasket to D-shape the heads. I don't do that. The butterflies that change around don't like boost. Most people remove them, but that leaves the short runner open all the time. Yeah, I don't think I would do that. When the blade opens, is it in the airflow path or something? Why is the blade not working? Would you rather have hand ported or CNC heads? Those two things are not absolute. So one of those isn't absolutely better than the other, because there's no consistency on either one of those. On a CNC head, whose CNC program is it? So is the program consistent? Well, the first thing you have to ask yourself is a cylinder head consistent? It's like you take a stock casting, the head itself is not consistent. So if you have a CNC program that does the same thing every time, except that the port in the head is not referenced the same every time, then the porting that the porting job does, even though it does the same thing every time in CNC, it's programmed, does the same thing every time. But imagine going in and do the porting, except that the head port is shifted over like this, and that's what happens. So it's not consistent. Also, the different CNC programs from different companies that are doing this, Texas Speed, Brian Tooley, Total Engine Airflow, whoever, their programs are going to be different. And so all the CNC things, all the different CNC things, and then the casting flaws and core shift and stuff can create situations where you get radically different head flow numbers from CNC heads. And then hand ported heads are wildly different. They could go anywhere from Richard ported it and you don't even want to look at it, to somebody like when Brian was doing stuff at Total, and when he owned Total Engine Airflow. And there's lots of good guys that have that know how to hand port heads and make. David Vizard's another good example that have done it a lot and know exactly what to do and know how to do it. And then those guys make a really good head. But Joe Schmo over here just ruins the head because it makes it too big. And so the hand ported stuff can be good or bad. The CNC stuff can be good or bad. And so you would want to pick one head that's good from either place. It doesn't matter. More power. So you put 100 hours into the heads. That's a lot for an E7 head. So I'm scrolling back. Long tube headers better for power than shorty headers. Yes, they're better everywhere. They're better down low. They're better in the middle. They're better up top. They're better everywhere than the stock manifold, and better than shorty headers. What's the single most effective horsepower gain from a factory 5.9 and 95 Dodge? You, well, the single biggest thing you can do would be add boost to it. You could put a turbo on it. But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to have a power adder on it, because that's going to be the best thing, you could add nitrous to it. That's very easy. A camshaft is probably going to be your biggest thing. Best performance intake for a 462 valve. I don't think that there's a good one that's a whole bunch better than the factory PI intake manifold. At least not in the RPM range where you're running that motor. Darren Morgan, Derek Vizard, Chad Spears all have excellent videos on porting. You're going to build your own V10 four valve now. Guys are already doing that, and I already offered to do dyno testing if they get it built and stuff. What's your opinion on putting a larger exhaust valve instead of 460 head, since the exhaust is what is so restrictive? I disagree with that. I don't disagree with it wholly. I'm not saying that the exhaust isn't restrictive, but when people are trying to make power with cylinder heads, most of their focus is on the intake, getting the air in. Getting the exhaust out is actually much easier because you have pressure helping you do that. I don't subscribe to the notion of just doing one or the other. I know guys want to do that kind of testing to see, well, what's worth more. And maybe if you were figuring, okay, where should I put my effort into? And I'm not going to put my effort into the other thing. I would say I would rather put half the effort into the exhaust and half the effort into the intake than all the effort into one thing, because I think you'd get better gains that way. Because when you do, porting is an interesting thing, because when you apply yourself, like I could do porting and I probably could get 75 or 80% of the potential flow gain like in an hour because I'm just doing the easy stuff. It's like going and picking a tree. You get all the low hanging fruit and you can get a lot of stuff. But to get the top stuff and the stuff inside, you got to get the ladder or cherry picker or whatever thing and get it. It takes a lot more work and a lot more effort. And porting is the same way. So you get a lot done. And I would rather do that and address both of those than just, okay, I'm just going to do the exhaust. Because I've never seen a cylinder head where just one side or the other is the bad thing. And all you had to do was fix that. And then all of a sudden the head's a good head. I've never seen that. And I've also never seen anybody be very much interested in anybody that I've ever talked to that does any racing, be very much interested in the exhaust until after they had lots of intake flow. On a street setup with a 4.8, the vehicle will be more fun and drivable with a smaller cam and makes great power all around instead of a big one that only makes power past 4 or 5. Yeah, because a 4.8, even in stock trim, is going to feel soft down low. And if you put more camshaft in it, it's going to make that situation even worse. Had some 180cc Ford Flowtech heads. Flow test them. They were 20 CFM down. Removed some shrouding and cleaned up some bad core shift in the bowl. Cut 17 back. Nice. Robert, I don't know what ported stage 2.5, 243 heads. I don't know what you mean by massive valves. I don't know how much those heads flow. I don't know what the specs are on your camshaft. The L6 intake I get, the LQ9 I get. I can't guesstimate on the head flow because I don't know. And the camshaft obviously is a real issue in trying to guess power. I'm afraid that's the short-term race. I know. I don't want to ruin that. Yeah, Julius, we've reached out to each other a couple of times, and I think it's cool what they're doing. I'm glad that they're doing it, and I'm not doing it. But if we can get it running and dyno tested, that would be kind of cool. Yeah, Mackenzie, we've talked about that before. The drivetrain losses isn't a percentage. It's a rudimentary percentage in the range that we kind of talk about most often. Or if it's a stock motor and we run the motor on the engine dyno and then we know what the stock motor is when we run it in the car, we can then calculate the percentage loss. But the thing is that percentage loss isn't fixed. It isn't the same for all of them. It's different for a manual and an automatic because you've changed the drivetrain. It's different for bigger rear ends and bigger tires and all that. So any advice on porting iron Cobra jet heads? You probably should not do that. You should leave them stock and get another set of heads to do, because those heads are pretty valuable now. Tips for porting 317 heads. Yeah, unshrouding the valve on a 317 head, even though the chamber is big, but it's still shrouded. If you look on the intake valve and look how close it is to the adjacent wall, and that's one area. And then also there are lots of guys that get more than 300 CFM from that head. So we ran a set from Total Engine Airflow and they worked out really well. Let's see. Somebody had an L98. Let's see here. I'm still scrolling back. Here we go. C4, you have, what kind of can you recommend for a hot street motor? Something like a 268 comp. I don't know what year your Corvette is, so I don't know if it's the hydraulic roller or if it's still a flat tappet, but they make that so something like a 218, 224 or 224, 230 kind of thing would make a pretty sporty one. Probably if you still have the tune port on it, go with a 218, 224. Matching gaskets, oval shape, shorty headers, engine 5/8 primaries, the D shape head. Are you worried about the shape difference between the head and the header? If that's the case, you shouldn't worry about that. I wonder how many guys think porting my own heads is a gasket match. That counts. If you've taken a cartridge roll or a carbide cutter or anything to your head, to the combustion chamber, to the bowl, to the entry, to the exit, any of that, that's porting. That counts. Can port heads be too much for a stock 5.3? No. You can port them incorrectly so that you throw off the low lift flow numbers and stuff and make it so the head is less effective. But you can't have, if the head is like a good set of ported heads, even on a stock motor, it's not gonna hurt power. Might hurt power a little bit down low. Does gasket matching heads and intake make any difference? I haven't seen it do that yet. It's possible to flood an engine with too much air. No. It just means that you haven't provided enough fuel. Are shorty headers better than stock exhaust manifolds? Sometimes they are a little bit. And they're lighter. My peanut ports went from 226 to 287. Nice. I was told you have to measure the valve in the throat of the port, and you can't go more than 91% of the valve size. Yeah, porting guys have real porting guys have lots of rules that they follow, but what I'm talking about is not that. We're not talking about doing stuff at that level. Porting a set of VW heads is a pain. Yep. Is an 862 head even worth porting on a 4.8? Not on a stock 4.8, I don't think. We've run ported heads on a 4.8, and it would definitely make some more power with ported heads. But, you know, after you put a cam and a good intake manifold and all that stuff on there. Porting peanut ports make me feel like a hero. That's right. I mean, it's hard to not make them better. I have a stage 2 cam, my 5.3 LS1 intake. LS1 intake, you need a better intake manifold. And if you port your heads, it can make more power. I don't know which stage 2 cam you're talking about, but you don't have to worry about it being too much. It's not going to be too much. The idea of putting too big of a head on a small motor is a myth, right? It's not a myth. You can put a really big head on with really big valves and really big ports and stuff, and the motor can't take advantage of that, and you get no gain, and you can lose power, but not normally in the range that we're talking about. If you take a set of 706 heads and port them, you don't really have to worry about losing power. If you try to put a set of LS3 heads on a 4.8 by notching the bore like we were talking about, you could definitely lose power with that. Probably won't lose power at the peak, but you're going to lose power somewhere. L98 stock exhaust manifolds utilized as a turbo kit. Would it be a problem considering there are only 2-bolt outlet flange? Will it support the weight of an S480? No, you should not rely on the weight or the flange, especially if it's a ball and socket flange, which that might be, to support the weight of the turbo. The turbo should have another support running over to the head or to the block. What happens if you grind down the divider in the intake and exhaust port on a Honda head? I don't know. I don't think guys normally do that. And if they do, they might only do it a little bit. Every head that I've ever run still has the divider. Every ported head that I've ever run. H62 has good combustion air, but a small valve on the intake side. Yeah, but it meaning that it's smaller than some of the others, some of the other ones that have bigger valves in it, but it still flows a lot. The coefficient of discharge is very, very good, partly because of the small head, and you can do lots of porting to that without changing the valve size. Most of the guys that do CNC programs on those heads, the guys that make them flow a lot, like the ones that we use from Brian and Total Engineer Flow, those guys went to bigger valves, but they also go to a bigger chamber if you're going to put the bigger valve in. You're interested in the exhaust on a mid-70s small block Ford head that had the biggest Thermac bump. Did the mid-70s one, it was worse than the E7 head? Richard Maskin from Dart once said in an interview, exhaust ports for what good heads are missing, so I made a good exhaust port. How big can you bore and stroke a 6.2 truck motor? Normally what guys do is they make it into a 416. So you won't bore it very much because it has the sleeves on it are fairly thin, but you can put a 4-inch stroke crank in it. And if you sleeve it, then you can make really big motors if you put different sleeves in. Problem is the factory sleeves are not very long, so there's a limit to how much stroke you can put in it. But once you sleeve it, you can also bore it. You can make it a 4.185 or a 4.200 bore. And then we've put, I don't know, 400 or 500 strokes in them. So we made 468s, I think, with them. I voted no because I haven't done more than a cosmetic gasket match. That counts, man. That counts as porting. If you took a grinder to it, that's porting. Are ported heads on a 5.3 benefit at all? Yes, they are. Take a look. We made it's required. A ported head on 5.3 is required if you're trying to make 500 horsepower. The stock head's not going to do that. Alberto, who wants to work on an 83 Datsun 280ZX and a 79 Datsun 210. Very cool. Is the ZX a turbo? Is a 205 or 208 valve better than a 317 head? None of the porting guys, none of the CNC guys put a 208 valve in that head. They all put a 2055, I think. So the 7706 heads will be better on a famed 5. What is it? What's a famed 5.3? Just need a bigger motor. The burnouts are weak on a 5.3. Yeah, the stage 2 cam would on a 5.3. Most stage 2 cams, even a truck stage 2, would need a converter. Yeah, see, the other guys are saying. What's the best stroke and safest for a 6.2 LS3? You have the heads that you have on there already will support 650 horsepower. So the stroke that we use on those on a stock 6.2 is, like I said, is a 4-inch stroke. Do you have video of power gains from compression? No, I don't. It's hard to get a change in compression without changing something else, without having there be a change in, like, we change the piston, changing the piston weight, you're changing the dome, changing the flame travel. You know, if you mill the head, you're changing the quench and the chamber design. And, you know, so there's a lot of things that are going into that. But the rule of thumb is 3 to 4% increase in power per 1 full point of static compression. Non-turbo automatic, yeah. Your little Betty voice module still works on the ZX. Those things had a lot of wowness from back then. They were a technological marvel. How big of a cam for porting to mean something? It's not that. It's a power level, probably. Porting is more than likely going to be beneficial. Only you can decide if the time and effort or the cost, if that has value. What size intake port do you think would have the same effect on a mild 454 that the LS3 head would have on a 4.8? I don't know that we could do that equivalent. I don't know how big that would have to be. The door is ajar, that's right. Flawless, what gears do you have in that thing? Ricky, the rule of thumb is 3 to 4, which is why we give that range, because there's not going to be an absolute thing. It's never going to be a guaranteed thing, like I said, because when you change the compression, you could be changing other things. It's probably an idealized thing, but I can tell you that the gain, and I always caveat that, by saying in what I call the golden range. So from 8 to 1 to 12 to 1, you're going to get those kinds of gains somewhere in there. Going from 15 to 1 to 16 to 1, you're not going to get that because your gains from mechanical efficiency and thermal efficiency, so they start canceling each other out. And then you're not going to get those gains going from 5 to 1 to 6 to 1 either. You're going to get it in the sweet spot. But lucky for us, that's the range that most of us are talking about. If I have an LS2 with 243 heads and a 237, 242 cam, will I be okay going to LS3 heads as far as valve clearance? I don't know. You have to measure it. Nobody's going to tell you that that's okay. And anybody that did shouldn't be telling you that. That's a big enough cam. I don't know what the LSA is. I don't know how much piston to valve clearance you have now. The valve drop is definitely different on an LS3 head. The valve is bigger. That's big enough where I would, putting it together, I would definitely measure it. Your Mustang had a coil fire? Did some mild porting. Port match on a stock 76 Honda 1500 CVCC. Nice. Would not run with the stock air cleaner housing. It would step on its face at 4500. Why would it do that? I actually want to do some porting on the Trail 90. A little off topic, but for an L99 is a DoD kit required for a cam swap on a 6.2. I'm going to say yes. What is that L99? 2010 to 15. Okay. Yeah, you don't want the displacement on demand unless you're going to have somebody grind you a displacement on demand camshaft for that, and you're not going to have that. All right, reloading's out. Porting friend did the head on a Tecumseh 4 horsepower go-kart. It helped, but it did kill the bottom end. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm thinking about making a longer runner intake. I would like to see a stock 4.8 with a 28 thick head gasket on the dyno because it would be at 20 quench. How do you know that it would be at 20 quench? How do you know where the piston is? Pistons can be 10 out of the hole on an LS. Stock ones can be. Porting to increase flow without increasing port volume and killing low RPM velocity is hard. Yeah, it is. That's why the gains I'm talking about going in and doing the bulwark and stuff is good and beneficial. Making the port bigger is not always beneficial. Go and switch to Turbo 350. Most of the ones I measured were 6 to 8, 68. Have you ever put LT heads on an LS? No, that's an exercise in futility, I think. I mean, I know they'll bolt on there with some work, but then you have to change everything else. got to change the intake manifold, the headers, you got to change the camshaft, change rockers, all of that stuff is different. So you're not just changing the head, you're not just putting the heads on. So go ahead and close our poll out. Have you ever ported your own heads? 52%. So a little more than half. Good. You want to see Big Bang methanol setups? So you want the Big Bang motors to run on methanol? The problem with that is you got to have gigantic fuel injectors for that. Makes me wonder at what point the methanol is displacing a lot more of the air. I wonder about that. Two more minutes. Never get to see the land rockets. I don't have any fast cars around. The car that I have in my front yard, or the one that I drive, is a 2002 Chevy truck, and it's all stock. I have had some fast cars. In fact, so I have some going together. You know, they call those project cars, which I got to get going on the Mustang because they all got to run. I got to get the Z and running and the Mustang. B&R, you're going from, you're changing 3. How much power was the 7.6 to 1 compression motor making before you went up to 11 where you got 80 horsepower? Because it's not going to do that. 3.5 times 4. I might have to retract my statement. Well, if that motor was making, it'd have to be making more than 500 horsepower NA at 7.6 to 1. It'd have to be making 550 horsepower to get the gain that you're talking about. 80 horsepower going to 11 to 1. Seems like a lot. Love to hear how people are getting more out of the E7s. David Vizard's got some good E7 stuff, I think, out there. Jesse, if that's directed at me, you don't want one of my tunes. It's only the top 3 lines have anything done. "1976 Pontiac 454 made 200 horsepower. If it made 200 horsepower to start out with, it's not going to gain 80 horsepower by going up in compression that much. 3 to 4% per 1 point of compression times 3. So if you get a gain of 14%, how long have I been at this? For forever? I think I've been dyno testing for 30 years now. How big of a work can make the LQ9? We normally just go 30 over. Some guys have gone to 4065, but I would definitely have it sonic checked if you're thinking about doing that. And I wouldn't never run something like that with boost. Jesse, take a look at the yours will be the last one. Take a look at the videos that I have up on the Sloppy Stage 2 cam test so you can get a pretty good idea. And on that note, it's time to go. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.